stream by the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. So welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please do so to myself, indicate to myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button that will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate this has happened. Please press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding in the middle of a meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the meeting evacuation point outside of the building. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Clark, Gulson and Niche.
So the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for the last meeting held on the 14th of April, and also the minutes held on for the 15th of May, with one minor alteration. It says that I was present at that meeting and I wasn't present at that meeting. So are we all minded to approve the minutes? Thank you. Thank you. So we will move on to item 2, which is members' interest. Are there any members that wish to declare an interest on any of the items this evening? Councillor Jordan.
Thank you. 4B, I'm the ward councillor, and also just for open and transparency, when I went to look at 4A, a gentleman did come out and wanted to talk to me, but I explained I couldn't discuss anything with him and left.
Thank you very much. Are there any other councillors? Thank you very much. So we will move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the planning service peer review. We have some officers here from our planning department who are going to talk us through that review. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is just for members to read into the peer review that came back, and following on from the, well, I found it personally a very useful training last Tuesday evening with most members that were able to actually attend. That was an opportunity for members to go through the 16 recommendations that have been put forward by the PAS, and basically the outcome from that actual recommendation, what that's likely to look at, what shape that's likely to look at. The report itself, as members will have seen as Agenda A, is attached to the actual PAS report in full. And what we're asking members to do this evening is just to receive the report and its findings, as well as noting that an action plan will be forthcoming or coming back to in front of members, which will break down each of those recommendations. Some of them have numerous sub-points within them, but it will come back for members to ratify those action plans and the time frame for delivering those recommendations. I'm happy to take any questions if any members want to ask any questions about the report, the actual 16 recommendations, or anything that perhaps wasn't covered in extensive detail last Tuesday evening. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any councillors that have any questions on the report? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it says on the front page, this is the final version, which makes me wonder what's happened to the previous ones. We've never seen them, or we don't know how many there've been, or, you know, it just creates a bit of, I don't know, suspicion in my mind. Being an old farmer, you know, we're suspicious of everybody. So, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you. In terms of this report, and having been through this process with other authorities, and I can't speak to this one, I don't have that information to answer your question, Councillor Butler, in short. However, what has happened with other authorities tends to be a draft version that comes from with PAS with the number of recommendations, so in this particular case 16. It's then circulated for the management team to look at and just go back and say that's a true reflection of what was discussed and of what was derived from various interviews. It's then published in the final version like we've got here. So there's not a 18, 19 recommendations that's whittled down to 16. It is the same report. It's just the first version, the first draft that's just submitted to be ratified, and then the final version comes back in.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this report to all those concerned in putting it together. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the training last week, so you may have covered the question I'm going to ask. There's lots of things that I'd like to explore a bit more, but I'll just pick one for today. So paragraph 1.9 talks about the scheme of delegation and the threshold for applications to come to DMC to being too low. Without wishing to preempt where we might end up too heavily, what's the direction of travel and where might we be expecting that to land?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through you. In terms of the scheme of delegation, effectively PAS were, their observations were as it's set at the moment in terms of the number of dwellings coming to committee, that was too low. Their reflection was, and what happens with other authorities, other schemes of delegation up and down the length and breadth of the country, that number's a little bit higher. And I think where we'd probably like to get to is looking at best practices out there. Some authorities have recently reviewed their schemes of delegation and perhaps just using some of those examples to bring through to our revised scheme of delegation that will alter. So effectively, what you're probably aware of, the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, there's currently, I think it's third reading at the moment, that's going to be set in a national scheme of scheme at, I think it's 10 to 100 dwellings that can be delegated as national scheme of approval subject to complying to the local plan. I'm not suggesting 10 is the threshold we'll go to, but certainly 2 is quite low, so I think it's going to be somewhere between the 2. Yet I haven't worked that through. I'm still reviewing other examples and other best practices out there. But certainly what I'd like to do is present the authority and give members the tools, the best scheme of delegation we've got to make sure that you do consider all those strategically important applications and those that can be or are in line with the local plan. Those are the ones that you will delegate that decision to the officers to interpret and come forward with the best scheme possible.
Are there any other questions from other councillors? Councillor Dew?
Just a comment, if I may. I thought the training in the workshop last Tuesday was really, really useful, and we break out into teams and pulling issues apart was a good way of doing it, and there's some good points raised on the night, and some of which I just wouldn't have thought of if others hadn't been in the room. So thank you for that. I thought it was good, and it's heading in the direction of where I think this wants to go. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dew. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Dew said, I thought the training session last Tuesday was very helpful. We got through quite a lot. I think members generally felt that a lot of this centres around communication. Just as we just heard from Sean there, that there's a new planning and infrastructure bill. We assume that will be passed very soon. That will change the planning system considerably. It's important that as part of the peer review and as part of that, we let parishes and applicants and developers know just what sort of service that we can provide, which I think is very good. Obviously some room for improvement, we all accept. We need to make some tweaks. But I think it's just key that people are aware and their expectations are also managed as part of this. And I know the recommendations, so I think Chair, myself and yourself, we need to discuss a timetable for this in consultation with Sean and Clara as well, and bring something back to development management as soon as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, we will have to chat together and get a timeline with that and to bring it back. Councillor Tevlin, did you have a question?
Yes, just a comment following on from Councillor Sanderson, just on in terms of feedback and communication, I think is really key there. I think parishes and residents, in terms of the local plan engagement, found the website really difficult and clunky to use, and I just want to relay this back as feedback for your teams and the comms side with planning, to make it more accessible in the future, and even what's happening at the moment with the consultation of additional sites, making it more accessible for people to actually write their feedback. It was very inaccessible during that time frame, so, and still is. So yeah, just my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tevlin. And I know that is something that is one of the recommendations, to look at the IT that is used within planning. Are there any other questions or comments? No. So thank you very much. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda. Okay, so before we swap over, they're swapping over, but we just want to make sure that all of the recommendations that are within that paper are agreeable to everybody. Yep, that would be lovely. And seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we will move on to item 4 on the agenda. So 4A, which is a planning application in Yaxley, and our planning officer, Kevin Simpson, will be presenting that to us.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So yes, this is agenda item 4A, which is pages 39 to 49 of the reports pack you have. And it's an application for a retrospective change of use of land to residential garden. There is just a late update to make you aware of here. So if you look at the first slide that's before you, the application form was submitted with certificate A, which indicated that the applicant owned the entire section of land that the application related to. Now, whilst land ownership is not necessarily a matter for planning, so somebody could submit a planning application on land that they don't own, for us it's just to make sure that the correct notice has been served, etc. So it's came to light since the report was prepared that the applicant has purchased the majority of the land, as you can see from the land registry title in red on the top image. But there is a section to the very far south, just where it juts out, that doesn't actually fall within their ownership at present. So I'll proceed with the presentation, and if members are minded to approve this evening, what we will request is delegated powers for us to approve this, but only once we're satisfied that the land ownership issue has been resolved or the relevant notice has been served on the landowners. Okay, so this application does relate to an area of land to the south of 3 new build dwellings at Norman Cross and equates to about 865 square metres. So it is brought to Development Management Committee because the officer recommendation of approval differs from that of the Parish Council. So this slide just shows the location. So you can see the bungalow to the very far north, and those 3 dwellings were approved and built on a section of land that was once garden land belonging to the bungalow. So those have been built within the last 5 years. And number 1 has acquired the majority of that section of land to the south and changed it to residential garden land. So this just shows an aerial view of the site. So you can see in relation to the hotel car park there to the far south, the extent of land where the change of use has taken place. You see the swimming pool and associated structures there. That plan shows the site plan, and where the blue line is, you can see that that was the original extent of land that was associated with number 1 Meadowview, so it was quite tight to the south elevation of that property, with the main section of land to the rear and the front. So that just shows, again, the extent of land that's proposed for the change of use. That's a photograph of the site, so you can see the structures on there. Just note the fence there to the right-hand side of the picture. That isn't the extent of the curtilage. What's actually happened is there is a section that's fenced off, and that's the section of land that I'm talking about regarding where there's still the ownership issue. So they've got that main section of garden land there, but there is a further section between that fence and the hotel car park. And that just gives a wider view of that site, so you can see the difference there and showing the actual boundary with the hotel car park. So you'll have noticed there are some structures on there. In the late representations that I put through at the end of last week, what we would seek to do is get a planning application in for those additional structures to be considered. So by approving, if members choose to approve this evening, you wouldn't actually be approving the structures on the site. It would be solely the change of use to garden land. Because there wouldn't have been any permitted development rights, because it wasn't garden land at the time that the structures were put in place, the applicant has been made aware that a planning application would need to be submitted, and we would condition that to say that it got to be submitted to us within a certain period of time. So the application is recommended for approval, and we would add conditions to say it needs to be maintained in accordance with the approved plans. We'd look to get a biodiversity method statement to achieve some biodiversity enhancement on the site. And as I said, we'd ask for a time-limited planning application to consider the additional structures that have been placed on there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. We have one speaker on this particular application, and that speaker is Councillor Andrew Wood, who's from Yaxley Parish Council, and I believe he is online. Just about. Yep, we can see you now, thank you. We can hear you.
Yes, this application is made all the more difficult for us to decide on with it being retrospective. But having looked at it, this area was previously an area of grassland, shrubbery and dense vegetation. However, it was detailed within the original plans for three buildings back in 2020, 2021, when the 3 houses were applied for development. Included within the reports for the initial 3-dwelling development was a biodiversity report and another relating to ecology. And the area was described as a dispersal route for various wildlife. The Parish Council is concerned that these reports from the initial application are being ignored. Page 12 of the biodiversity report on the initial application mentions the proposal includes the retention of existing boundary hedgerows. The protection of existing vegetation would be in accordance with BS 5837, and inspection of the site would occur each summer for the first 5 years. In relation to the ecology report, they did say that there was evidence of bat occupation found. In addition to that, there was reference to greater crested newts, where they said there was no actual evidence of them being seen, but the species needs no further survey as the proposals do not involve any disturbance to boundary habitats. There would be no perceived impact on greater crested newts should they be present and utilise the site's marginal habitats for foraging or dispersal. Recommendations have been made to enhance that hibernation and foraging opportunities for that species. So with that particular area of vegetation and shrubbery adjacent to the plots, the biodiversity and ecology reports did see those as being positives against the development occurring. The fact that those have been totally ignored now in respect to this this application being put through retrospectively is simply of concern. I know it's a difficult thing to deal with in the fact that that dense vegetation no longer exists, but and it's difficult to see what could be done, but it is of concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wood. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? We don't appear to have any questions, so thank you for joining us, and please do stay on the call so that you can hear our discussion.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Do we have any questions of clarification? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if I missed it in the late reps. 7.18, do we receive any comments from Historic England just involving the scheduled monument? So that it appears from your report, Kevin, that there's no concerns from officers about the impact on that.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Yes, I believe, and sorry, that should have been in the late report, but not sure when it came through, but I would just double check that. I think we've received a response that says that they'd got no comments to add on this application, but I will just double check that for you now, okay? Yeah, sorry about the delay there. Yes, so we did receive correspondence from Historic England, and they just noted the application site lay adjacent to the Norman Cross Depot for Prisoners of War. And they put, we provide advice when our engagement can add the most value. In this case, we're not offering detailed advice, and they state that this should not be interpreted as a comment on the merits of the application, which is their standard response. We've done an informal consultation with our internal conservation team, and they've not raised any objections to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pitt, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a maybe two-part or slightly amorphous question around two different points. So, just to understand the existing permission for the three dwellings, as I read through the pack, I was kind of imagining maybe there'd be sort of a suspension of permitted development rights. I don't think that is the case on that application. And then I was wondering whether that would be something that could be useful in terms of if the committee was, minded to approve the application, whether there's any merit in investigating that. I mean, I realise that will have an impact on any structures that are there at the moment, but just wanted to, it's a rather open question, sorry, but if you can give me any advice on whether this is relevant to this application.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Yes, that is actually something we considered. But when we apply a planning condition, it has to meet several tests, and one of those would it be reasonable to apply conditions there? And given what people can do under permitted development and the reasons why we would normally apply those conditions, it would be either to protect neighbour amenity or to protect the character of an area. So in this case, we've got the hotel car park directly adjacent, so there's not really any neighbour amenity issues. And when you look back at the character of the area, if we were talking about a site that was clearly in the countryside where there could be harm arising from any built development that could happen under permitted development, I think we could say it would be reasonable to do that. I think here, because it is in a location which is not necessarily in a built-up area, but there are elements of it which urbanise it. And I think actually in the original permission for the dwellings, which got allowed under an appeal, the inspector recognised that the character of the area had changed somewhat, or would be changing because of the Great Haddon development. So I think the built form that's being introduced surrounding there, the fact it's in such close proximity to the A1 and other built development would be a reason it probably wouldn't meet the test to say we should remove permitted development rights.
Are there any other questions from councillors? Any questions of clarification? Councillor McAdam.
Just on the, thank you, Chair. Just on the ecology aspect of it. They mention about great crested newts and bats. From what's been said, I'm not actually clear on whether there actually are bats and great crested newts, or has this just been put forward because it's thought that they're probably present in the area, but we don't really know? What is actually the position with this, please?
Thank you, Councillor McAdams. So when I looked back over the history, I couldn't find anything specific to say that there was particular concern over that section of land. I think it is a challenge because, as the gentleman from the Parish Council pointed out, it is a retrospective application. And although we don't treat those any differently in terms of considering how we determine it, any opportunities to protect that land has been lost because it's been cleared. I think on the other side of that, because the applicant has acquired the land, there were no protected trees or anything on that land, protected hedgerows. So even without a planning application, he could have cleared that land and we could have had the same outcome regardless of the planning application coming forward. And I think that's the consideration for me.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officer? If there are no more questions, we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion for me? Thank you, Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's what Kevin's just said to us. I think it's a really good point to sort of go on from. I think the fact that it's, we've lost this habitat there, it's gone. We have to accept that. Don't have to like it, but it is what it is. But recommendation approval subject to the following conditions. One of them is biodiversity enhancement. So I think sort of following on from what Kevin's just said, we have to accept what's there, in front of us now, and one of the conditions is that they're going to enhance the biodiversity there. And if they don't do that, well, then that becomes an enforcement issue a bit later on, and then that's so therefore I have no issue in sort of this moving forwards, but it's a bit early really for to sort of propose, but I'm happy to if it comes to it, so, but just sort of see where it goes first. Thank you, Chair.
So as you are willing to propose, are you happy to also have the recommendation about delegating powers of the decision relevant to ownership of that patch of land as well?
Yes, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Who else would like to contribute to the discussion? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report is very thorough and it covers all the main points. I know Councillor Wood's concerns from the Parish Council perspective about this being retrospective, but that is not a factor here, is it, really? We've can I look at what's in front of us. And I think it's at 7.13 where so previously an appeal was granted on this site, and the application is quite similar, I think, to that one, if I've interpreted that correctly. So I can't see any reason to decline this. I think all the points have been covered in terms of visual amenity, effect on neighbouring properties, etc. It's not a factor. So if Councillor Corney's proposed, I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Dew.
I was going to very much cover off the points that my colleagues have just made. In a perfect world, we'd have seen this beforehand and could have had a look. It is what it is. We've got an inspector's opinion on the previous application and things that have gone on there. The site's cleared, and I think, as the point was well made, if we've got a biodiversity gain wording in this time, at least we can bring something back, so I'm quite happy to go with it. Not a perfect world, but it is what it is.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dew. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to the discussion? No, so we will move to a vote. Councillor Corney has proposed with the addition of delegating powers for the relevant to sort out the relevant ownership issues. And also we've had Councillor Sanderson second the proposal. So all those in favour, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Any against?
1.
Any abstentions? Therefore, that has been approved. We will move on to item 4B on the agenda. Item 4B is a planning application in Brampton for the erection of a single chalet-style two-bedroom bungalow with associated parking in Pepys Road in Brampton, Huntingdon. And our planning officer, Charlotte Dew, will be taking us through that when she is ready.
Sorry, Chair, just bear with me. There seems to be a slight freeze on the computer. 1 second.
So it looks like our IT issues are solved. So we will move on to this particular item, which is 4B on our agenda.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This is agenda item 4B in the reports pack. Just as a late update, the applicant has submitted an updated wheeled bin unilateral undertaking in light of the updated costs following the developer contributions SPD review. This is an application that seeks planning permission to demolish the outbuilding and erect a two-bedroom chalet bungalow with off-street parking for two vehicles in the side garden and driveway of number 8 Pepys Road, Brampton. The site is shown on this map as hatched black. In terms of constraints, the site is within the Brampton Conservation Area and there are several listed buildings within the vicinity of the site. This application is a resubmission of application reference 2200669 full. The application was refused under delegated powers in May of 2022 for the following reasons: cramped and incongruous form of development, unacceptable overshadowing and overbearing impacts on adjacent neighbours, insufficient information regarding biodiversity loss and trees, and no provision for bins or secure cycle storage. This is an aerial view of the site displaying the wider context. The site is outlined in yellow. The application site is a narrow rectangular shaped parcel of land comprising of a garden, driveway and outbuilding associated with number 8 Pepys Road. This is the submitted site location and block plan. Number 8 Pepys Road is within the applicant's ownership and etched in blue. This is the floor plans of the proposed chalet bungalow. This is the proposed elevations of the chalet bungalow. Due to the long and narrow nature of the site, the dwelling is designed with a narrow frontage and deep pan form. The dwelling has been designed with varyingly steep pitched hipped roofs to reflect the character of the surrounding dwellings. This is a street scene elevation showing the proposed dwelling in the context of Pepys Road. The street scene is characterised with linear form of development with approximately 3 to 4 metres side separation distance between dwellings. The proposed dwelling would not have such a generous separation distance. However, in comparison to the previously refused application, the side separation distance has doubled. The proposed infill development is not considered to be unacceptably cramped in this immediate site context. This slide compares the block plans of the scheme refused in 2022 and the proposal. This slide compares the elevational plans of the scheme refused in 2022 and this proposal. The design, scale and mass of the proposed dwelling is now considered more proportionate and acceptable for the plot than the previously refused scheme. This slide demonstrates the 25 and 45 daylight and sunlight degree tests undertaken on the habitable room on the east elevation of number 6 Pepys Road. On the left-hand side is the 25-degree test, which is marginally failed, and on the right is the 45-degree test, which is passed. For a proposal to be unacceptable in planning terms, there needs to be a failure of both tests. The degree of harm to the residential amenity of the occupants of number 6 in terms of loss of light and daylight to their side bedroom office window would not be unacceptable to warrant refusal on this basis. This photo was taken from Pepys Road looking towards the gravel driveway of number 8. Concerns raised by objectors in terms of on-street parking along Pepys Road are acknowledged. However, these are existing problems over which the application has no control. Parking would be retained for number 8, and 2 vehicle parking spaces is proposed for the 2-bedroom chalet bungalow, which is considered sufficient. This is a close-up photo of number 8's gravel driveway and the existing boundary treatments. On the right-hand side of the photo, just over here, is the habitable room of number 6, for which the 25 and 45 degree tests have been undertaken. The common boundary is separated with a 1.8 metre close board fence. This photo was taken from within the site looking towards number 8 Pepys Road. The Parish Council's concerns regarding the potential deterioration in the quality of the road is acknowledged. However, any damage to this private road through use or associated with the proposed construction of the dwelling is a civil legal matter and not a material planning consideration. These photos have been taken from within the site at the rear garden of number 8. Approximately 40 square metres of vegetated garden to the front and west of number 8 would be impacted by the proposed development. A condition is recommended to secure the details of a biodiversity net gain plan, which would detail how a 10% net gain would be achieved prior to commencement. In conclusion, the officer recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions listed on this slide and detailed in section 8 of the report. To let you know, we've recommended the removal of PD rights just because of the long and narrow nature of the site and the impact on residential amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that report. We have no speakers for this particular application. And as members will be aware that this has come to DMC because it's contrary to the officer's recommendation, which is approval, but the parish have recommended refusal. And within our paperwork, it tells us why the parish have objected, which our planning officer has briefly gone over. So in that case, as we have no speakers, we will move on to any questions of clarification for our planning officers. Are there any questions for our planning officers? Councillor Pitt, thank you.
Thanks. So the refusal reasons for the previous application outlined in 4.1, do the officers feel that any of those still apply? So I can see there's quite a lot of movement in the right direction on a number of those points, but are there any that you would sort of draw our attention to that are kind of still sitting around the threshold, please?
No, we're quite happy with this proposal and support it.
Councillor Tevlin.
Thanks, Chair. The Parish Council have highlighted their concerns around it being in a conservation area. I know 5.4, there hasn't been any comments on it from the Conservation Officer. Is there anything that should be alarm bells in terms of it going into the conservation area, or is it all okay? Thanks.
No, in fact, this proposal is more in keeping with the character of the conservation area, and the street scene is, I don't know. Oh, sorry. It's more in keeping with the street scene, particularly with the pitch of the roofs. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for our planning officer? There are no other questions, so we will go on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Jordan, thank you very much.
Okay, yes, it was when I saw this was on the agenda, I hadn't got the paperwork, but I happened to have a meeting in Pepys Road, And when I first looked at it without the paperwork, I thought, how on earth are they going to get a bungalow in there? But then I went back and I read it, and I also had a meeting actually in the rectory, which is just the other side of this proposed building. And again, I think you're right. I think you've gone over it, and my fears were sort of taken away because I just couldn't see I could do it. But I think looking at the previous application and then looking at this one, it is right. It is in complete keeping with the other chalet bungalows that are in that area, and they've all got a slightly different character to them because they've probably all been built at different times of that road. I mean, my only concern was over the sewage, but you seem to have addressed that with Anglia Water, or the applicant has addressed it, I believe, and that. So, whereas when I first saw it, without the paperwork, I will admit, I did think, how are you going to fit it in there? But I have to say that going over the paperwork, and I went over it thoroughly, and when I went back and looked over it 2 or 3 times, I can see why it's been approved. So, yeah, I don't really have any problems with it, but I'll listen to the debate if you like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jordan. Is there anyone else who would like to? Thank you, Councillor G.
It's always interesting to see when you get reapplications and realise that the applicant has actually listened to what came out the first time and dealt with them. The questions that were asked by colleagues regarding, from Councillor Pitt especially, regarding the issues where they all dealt with, and the fact they've gone away and come up with an alternative plan, presumably working with ourselves as a council to make sure that works. So it's a good thing to see. I mean, before it now, it's it fits nicely on the site, whereas the previous application was a huge, great carbuncle of an application. So I think this is much, much better. It's never perfect, but in so many ways it works. It's on flood zone 1. It's in the conservation area, but I mean, conservation area doesn't mean you have to pick it in aspect. It just means the quality has to be good and not affect the listed buildings and the conservation area as a whole. So it should enhance it. And all in all, I think it does. So I'm quite happy to propose acceptance when you want that call in, Chairman. I'll take it now. I'll save calling me later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dew. I will take that proposal. Thank you. Councillor Mockball.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm in total agreement with Councillor Dew, and I also nice to see all the recommendations that we've got a long list. So I mean, not recommendations, conditions that we've put on this application. So I'm happy to second when you need me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mockball. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to the discussion? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. I think the only thing that for me counts against it significantly is the proximity to the neighbouring properties, which is quite a bit, closer than the neighbouring, the rest of the street scene. Is that enough for me to be tempted to vote against it? I don't think so. I think, it's the right side of acceptable on that front, and I think the rest of it, as has been commented elsewhere, particularly the scale of massing is, entirely in keeping with the street scene. So I'm happy to support this application pending any other further discussion.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to contribute to the discussion? There's nobody else that wishes to contribute, so we will go on to the vote. So we have a proposal of approval from Councillor Dew, and which has been seconded by Councillor Mockball. Therefore, all those who approve, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
That is unanimous, and that has been approved. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 5, which is appeal decisions. And our planning service manager will present a report to us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to draw members' attention to the item number 5. Most of the actual appeals have been dismissed, with the notable exception of 2. The first one was an enforcement notice, which effectively is marked as a split decision. It was still complied with. The appellants still need to carry out the work that's required. It's the planting and ongoing maintenance of an orchard for housing development. The reason why it was a split decision was because a plan that the authority had relied upon, which we thought was the correct plan, it came out during the actual appeal that the information was on a made-up piece of ground, so the levels weren't quite correct. It didn't take anything away from what's required, i.e. the planting of an orchard and the ongoing maintenance thereof. It just meant that the actual decision itself, or the documentation, the breaches as it were, one of them had to be let go. So that's why it's a split decision, where effectively one of the elements had fallen away, but the main thrust of it, the planting of the actual orchard and the ongoing maintenance is still a requirement which the inspector agreed with, and that's still going to be brought forward. The other point was the application at 48 Common Lane. That's on the second page. The application was allowed, the appeal was allowed. The planning inspector in that particular case didn't agree with our concern, or the concern expressed by officers, to the impact of an additional carport on the setting of the conservation area. So the inspector didn't see eye to eye with ourselves as officers. It unfortunately does happen on occasion. That was it, Chair.
Thank you very much for that report. I just want to say thank you to our planning officers for all the hard work that they've put into making these reports, and thank you to councillors coming and discussing and making those decisions. Okay. Therefore, that is the end of our meeting.